This video cast is about incorporating a not-for-profit, and it's looking very specifically at Quebec. And what we'd like to do is walk you through the approximate 10 steps there are to doing incorporation, but with a little bit of a setting the context first, because there's some important things to think about in terms of why you would even incorporate and differences between incorporating and having charitable status. So Sam's going to walk you through all of this information, and I'm going to bug him and ask him questions.
It's kind of the way our relationship goes. So first of all, talking a little bit, what the heck does it mean to incorporate? It's a word that gets used a lot, and folks don't always know exactly what it means, so we'll give you a quick definition. To incorporate means to create a separate legal person. It means that you're taking a certain project that you're doing, and instead of having it just be yours, you're creating something that can start its own bank account, so like Sam's Soup Kitchen. It can get its own funding, and it will be an independent legal body.
And so one of the things I think when I'm talking to groups about incorporating that's really important around that is the idea that incorporating a not-for-profit is about building something new in the community. It's building a community effort. It's not about what I want to do, it's about what we see as a need that needs to be responded to in the community.
Absolutely, and what's really neat about that is that the law really reflects that idea. We've decided as a society that when we have community organizations, nonprofit, incorporated groups, that they're required to have a membership body, they're required to have a board of directors that have at least 3 members, and so it's never just one individual's project, it's some kind of community building effort. So there's a real movement as well from activist groups and certain folks working for social change who are pretty critical of the nonprofit model, who talk about creating social change not as something that should be encapsulated in these small groups that sort of echo the corporate model, but rather should be more based in community movements and in social movements, and that all the bureaucracy involved in keeping yourself together as a nonprofit, submitting the declaration every year, having a board of directors meeting, that's really put a damper on some of the social change work that was happening in the 60s and 70s. And there's a really neat book, The Revolution That Will Not Be Funded, that talks about some criticisms and some of the ways that social movements have changed into becoming more in the nonprofit structure. And if you're the kind of folks who feel concerned about those issues, then incorporation really might not be the right choice for you.
Yeah, and I would even say for people that do incorporate, you should read that book.
Yeah.
Because I think we need to stay very vigilant about the challenges of becoming corporatized when we incorporate.
Absolutely.
And we do tend to often bureaucratize, and we want to stay away from that.
For sure, and sometimes the work that we're doing, the only way we're going to get the funding to do it, it's so important, and the only way we're going to get the funding to do it is by incorporating. But that doesn't mean that we can't find a way within those structures to keep an eye on the social change and to stay critical of the laws as they stand.
So the difference now between incorporating and charitable status.
Right, so there's a lot of confusion about this issue, and there are actually 2 separate processes. So if you'll look in Quebec, there's hundreds and thousands of nonprofit organizations, and only some of them have charitable status. Charitable status goes through the Canada Revenue Agency. It's a federal process. It gives you the ability to issue tax receipts for charitable donations, and it lets you access a particular type of funding that comes from foundations, charitable foundations. So maybe you've heard of Centraide or United Way or McConnell. Those are just some examples of charitable foundations that charities could access. Now, like I said, there's many, many organizations that only have nonprofit status. Nonprofit status comes through either Quebec or Canada. You can incorporate provincially and start your organization, have it only work in Quebec, or you can incorporate federally if you're doing work on a national level or in different provinces.
Okay. So just so that I've got it straight, when we're incorporating, it's because I'm doing something that's community-based, that's involving other people. I can incorporate, or I can just do my work without incorporating, but if I'm finding the reasons to incorporate, such as I might decide that I need some funding or that we need a lot more structure to our organization, then I might want to consider incorporation.
Absolutely.
And then I need to think about provincially or federally if I'm working more across Canada, or internationally. I might want to consider incorporating federally.
Absolutely. Okay. And you do bring an important point that I should emphasize again, which is that the idea of incorporation, of creating this separate legal body, is that it does protect yourself. So if you have your own little project that you've been doing, and maybe you've been having your soup kitchen at home, and you've been buying the carrots and other such things with your own money, by creating this separate organization, it becomes a community's responsibility, and it also limits your personal liability. And that's another one of the reasons why a lot of folks decide to incorporate.
Okay. So that gets into that first step. Is incorporation right for you? What else do we need to say about that? I guess it's also, there's different kinds of legal structures that we can have.
Absolutely. So the cooperative model has become more and more popular in Quebec. There's the Solidarity Co-op, the Workers Co-op, the Producers Co-op, Consumers Co-op. Those are all examples that we talk about more in other resources that we have at COCo that discusses cooperatives. Those are resources that currently in progress, but we've identified a real need there. It might be that a cooperative model is more appropriate for your organization.
Yeah, or just being a registered organization, or something that isn't legal at all, in terms of just an informal group, might make sense for your group. So that's the first one, really. Do you need to incorporate? What are the choices, and is nonprofit the right choice to make for your group?
Absolutely.
What's the second one, Sam?
The second one that we like to talk about is project development, thinking about what it is exactly that you want to do. And this is actually a time when you're thinking, what kind of programs do I want to have? What sort of activities am I looking to engage in? That we urge you to think critically about who else is doing the kind of work that I'm thinking about doing. So we'll often see that there's groups that think at first, I need to start my own group, that the only way to get this work done is if I start a new group to do it. And then when they think a little bit critically, they realize, oh, there's another organization that's doing very similar work. And so maybe it makes more sense to propose a new program to them.
And that's actually one of the big issues that we've seen at COCo, that there's a lot of people who want to start not-for-profits, and often not all of that work has been done to see what's already going on out there, and can what I'm doing be part of something larger, so that in that partnership there's a lot more strength to the work.
Exactly. Another thing that you'd want to think about when you're thinking about your project development is your mission statement. So really describing what are your values as an organization, what are you looking to create, and trying to etch out with a couple of different people who will be involved in the organization at the beginning, what is this nonprofit baby that you're creating?
Yeah. And one of the things that really helps at that stage is getting a couple of people who are already experienced in working this area, so you get kind of like mentors involved and people who can guide you in terms of the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. And finally, for that stage of things, we would also urge you to think about whether at some point you might think about applying for charitable status. Charitable status, like we said, it's a separate process through the Canada Revenue Agency, but there's certain regulations that you need to follow when you're incorporating your organization that make you eligible for charitable status. So what I would suggest is, if you're thinking down the line, I might want charitable status, is to take the time to listen to our video cast about charitable status, and to look at the info sheet so that you're aware of the eligibility requirements.